right, Andrea, welcome to the Unique Perspective. I think we chatted back before this was an actual podcast. I think I just was doing lives in our group and had you on and had Dan on and had a few other people. So this is actually, I think, the first time you've been on the Unique Perspective. We just spent 15 minutes talking about some really interesting, fun things. And I was like, we should just hit record so we can actually capture some of this because we're going to share all this good stuff and have fun, entertaining conversations and then realize we're like 30 minutes in and we haven't recorded any content. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I respect you so much in business, and I am very excited to talk about anything business or life with you.
Yeah, and there's so much of the talk. I know one of the big things is talking about the economy, what's going on, the kind of future of the economy, our monetary system. Like, there's so much stuff that, because I know you have expertise in that, and we just spoke a little bit about it. And I know it's polarizing right now because there's a lot of people who have very strong views on both sides of what's going to happen. But I just want to get this off. Let's talk about this for like a few minutes and then just move on past it. Because to me, it's fascinating. I know you and I just spoke about it for a few minutes, but like, so you were on The Apprentice for a season. I don't know how many episodes. It seems like I just Googled beforehand because I was looking up something else about you, and then I was like, and The Apprentice, I was like, we've known each other for a long time. I never knew that. And I was like, she's probably not going to want to talk about it, but I'm just so curious about it. Not even because of the Trump thing, but just like reality TV in general and how big that's become, and to just ask some questions around it. Like, I guess the first thing would be, I know why one of the reasons why you did it. We don't have to talk about that, but like at a bigger level, like, do you think it was a net benefit for you? Like these business shows, Shark Tank, Apprentice stuff, was it a net benefit, or was it something you just kind of did personally and you're like, it didn't really change any outcome of my life? Like if I did or didn't do it, I would be kind of in the same place.
It was definitely a net benefit. And for anybody that has a way to capitalize off of a reality TV show, which is actually what the Kardashian ladies have done so well, basically any TV time that you have is like a free national commercial, right? So you get, The Apprentice was 42 minutes long for an episode. I was one of the featured characters, one of the main featured characters in that season. And so I would have like 4 to 6 minutes of people just me time talking on there. And so people that liked me would go and Google my stuff. And the producers asked me, what do you want your title to be? Because I've started 14 companies in a load of different spaces. And I said, I want it to say sticker company owner. And Mark Burnett had 3 separate conversations with me because he just didn't get it yet. Because this is like, I think we filmed in 2004 and it aired in like 2005 or somewhere around there. And he was like, why don't I just call you entrepreneur? And I'm like, because people are going to Google sticker company and Sticker Junkie is going to come up and they're going to go buy stickers, which is, of course, exactly what happened. But there was lots of net benefit of it. And even still to this day, I mean, that was like a million years ago that I was on that show. And when it comes up, like Max and I have probably known each other for like 7 years. It does not come up very often with my friends. But when it does come up, it's always like an interesting talking point because it is fascinating also to have that moment where I was like a little bit famous. And it was really unpleasant for me to be famous and recognized and known. I got offered another TV show right after that called The Making of a Billionaire, and I declined it. It was just going to be a show about me and my companies, but I was just like, I don't like people to know who I am or what I do. I'm an incredibly private person in general, probably because of having been on that TV show. Like I just released my personal deck on my website, and previous to that, nobody understood what all my business accomplishments were because I just don't talk haven't done very many podcasts over the years, haven't done very many interviews, etc.
It is wild. You think, but that was 2004, 2005. You think about if you had done that today.
Oh my God.
Excluding where Trump is today, but just like him being the same person he was then, but like today, I mean, it would be the additional amplification and exposure is insane.
Yeah, and there's so much stuff going on right now where everybody is talking about mental health. And when you're on a TV show like that, you don't get paid a lot of money for it. So I was a multimillionaire being on that show. So I had so many layers of protection. I had a big house. I had my own mountain in Santa Fe that I lived on at the time. And so I was geolocationally remote and it was easy for me to get away from people. But I did have a stalker. A literal actually would show up at my work, show up when I was traveling at hotels, like a total stalker from just being that much famous. And so I look at these poor women that are like on The Bachelor or on some TV show where they don't, well, now that they have the influencer route, but where they didn't before, and there's no security protection against them. And almost every woman on my season had stalkers. It was bizarre, but they didn't have any, they just like had to live in their apartment, which anybody could find and then go find them. So there is like a very weird thin veil that a true celebrity that has a lot of cash can work their way around, but a regular person cannot. So like people that go on Survivor, there's no protection or follow up for you. But if you have a route towards monetization, it's just a complete win.
Yeah, I've always wanted. It's an interesting topic of like celebrity, right? And the negatives that come with the positives. And the distinction you made there is good, but like I've always felt, you know, it comes with the territory. It's not. It sounds bad to say, right? It's like nobody should have to deal with that, right? So first of all, it's without there. Like it's always bad and always negative. But it's like you kind of know that that's the route you're going down. That's why I never necessarily feel bad for like when the Kardashians, different people complain about like I can't have a break and I can't go just do something by myself. It's like that is true, but that's the price essentially you're paying to be worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and be able to, fly around the world on a private jet and have all these things. Like that's the cost, is like those people who are crazy, like buy all your shit, right? Every app you put out, every cosmetic line you put out, like they're waiting in line to buy it. And you're going to have some crazies in there that like want to take pictures with you and like come to your house and stuff. And again, like it sucks and it's terrible. I feel bad for like kids and the stuff that didn't choose to be in that life. But it's also, it's this weird double-edged sword where it's like, there's some sympathy obviously as a human being, but there's also like, this is how you make your living, right? You made your living by being an influencer, and an influencer means you have to have lots of people that trust you, want to buy from you. And like you can't like put a wall there. Like I only want you to care when I'm selling you crap, but like when I'm doing anything else, like I want you to ignore me and treat me like a normal person.
Right. Yeah, I do get it. It is a really interesting double-edged line. I think the most sympathy I have are for people who can't afford security details.
Yeah.
And especially as a woman, just that, you face a whole different set of threats of sexual violence, of murder, of kidnapping that men just in general, male celebrities don't face in the same ways. And, that stuff, like when they say there's a stalker that came into the home and jumped the fence at a Kardashian's house, that person probably had incredibly malintent. That person was meaning to do harm to the person on the other side of the gate. And that's terrifying. But yes, at the same time, I agree with your assessment. And that was my assessment too, is like, that's the price you pay. And so I am not going to go do another TV show that just stars me and is about my life, because it's too high of a price for me to pay, even though I could see where my companies would grow. I have been incredibly financially successful as an entrepreneur, but my companies would have exponentially grown to where years that I was doing 10 million in sales, I probably would have done 100 million in sales. My business partner, the founder of Tap Out Clothing, Dan Caldwell, he had a reality TV show, and that year his sales scaled from, in the tens of millions to in the hundreds of millions in a single year, because the whole half-hour TV show was just like basically a commercial for their brand.
Yeah. And he had stuff. It was like the ultimate, during those like peak, like Ultimate Fighter years, like, all the guys were wearing Tap Out and stuff. It was just 30-minute blocks of free advertising every week for him.
Crazy. Yeah, it was the #1 show on the Spike Network for a long time, which was a very big, male-oriented network back then. They bought it from Versus, which was another one of the big male networks. And yeah, it just killed it. So then when I was thinking of doing the making of a billionaire, I'm like, any business I release is going to sell. And we were in a mastermind group at the time that was going on, that he was starting that show. I was like, if I do this show, my companies will go from 10 million to 100 million in sales. And I immediately was like, no, I'm good. It's too big of a cost.
Yeah. And it's the context and the relationship that the people who are following and watching have with that person is definitely different with men and women, right? It's like, this may seem stereotypical, so I'll preface that by saying it. But it seems like there's a lot of data supported, like, a lot of female influencers, not in the entrepreneurial world, but just like Instagram and stuff, like they get millions of followers because they post a lot of provocative content, right? That's a go-to strategy. And so obviously the people that are following them are definitely creepier, and they're not following them for like business advice, right? It's not like, the people who follow Gary Vee and Grant Cardone, like they're not, for the most part, I'd assume, like they're not following them because they have some type of like personal fantasy about them, or obsession that they want to meet them in person and like follow them everywhere. It's like, like I want to listen to Grant because I want to hear him talk about money and put $1,000,000 on the table, right? So that relationship is definitely different when you think about like fans and followers, which is also what kind of makes it scary to see, like knowing that that's the reality, the continued evolution of platforms that basically are built to monetize that, where like
Yeah.
OnlyFans has grown exponentially during the pandemic, right? It's like the amount of people on that platform now is insane, and essentially it's just has millions of people that charge monthly for access, like personal access. And that's it gets scary when that door is opened and so easy for so many young people, right? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
I can come out of, maybe I don't have a college degree, or I went to college and dropped out, or I went to college and realized like, I don't want to go work 80-hour weeks on Wall Street or go to become a lawyer or a doctor or anything when I can go over here. Like there's, that Catch Me Outside girl, like literally went from being a crazy person on Dr. Phil to doing $1,000,000 in a day, and now being a Grammy Award winning rapper. Like it's
All of the eye rolls, all of them, all at once.
it's insane. Yeah, and I have a lot of personal views on it, but it's like, I mean, it's hard if you are a young person and that's what you see, to want to go a harder route. Like, and listen, I'm not saying that being a influencer isn't work, right? Like I know people that like
Yeah.
are influential in the entrepreneur space, like, and they have large followings, and they put a lot of work into the content and the audience. Like Pat Flynn, my good friend, like he has a huge following. SPI, like he's a whole company. It's like he pumps out a lot of content. They're shooting stuff, investing in studios, and like, so I get it, but it's also like it is scary having a son now, and like looking at the stats and seeing that like the top 3 careers that kids want to have now are all basically in the influencer space. It's not like I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a doctor, or even an athlete. It's like I want to be a YouTuber, and it's like that scares me a little bit. You're not creating anything.
It's actually one of the reasons why I created the Power Chick Mafia, for young women to see that you can be like a powerful, badass, super rad chick, and you can be sexy and beautiful, and you do not have to be naked on Instagram, and you do not have to look like a Victoria's Secret model to be successful in life. And there's just so much self-esteem issues in it, especially for young boys too, but especially for young girls, to where they're seeing like, I have to be naked on Instagram to be influential in life. And they're just having that reinforced. So the women that we get in with Power Chick Mafia are like, career at the CIA, doing, huge multi-billionaire entrepreneurs and hundreds of millions of dollar entrepreneurs, and just all self-made and self-started and started from nothing, so that they can see that like you actually can do a different route. Like not that there's anything wrong with tapping into your sexuality and doing a really sexualized Instagram, but it does feel like if you're a 14-year-old girl that grows up in Ohio, that seems like your ticket. And then it just opens young girls up to so much exploitation and things that they're going to post that they're going to regret when they have kids, and they like look back on these really outrageous things that they were posting when they were 14, 15, 16, 18 years old that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. I thought about this, that comment about like, regretting content. Like, I wonder if we've already seen this in presidential races of like, people say stuff and it's recorded on camera or audio, right? And that happens seemingly every presidential race the last 10 plus years. I can only imagine, like, let's say it's the 2050 presidential race, and I don't know if that lines up for the year, but 2050 presidential race, like, I mean, at some point it's going to be like the level of dirt you need to have on somebody needs to be like they basically murdered a family and like hid their body somewhere and like TikToked it and they got caught. But like I feel like normal stuff that has been a scandal for most people, like there's just no way in 10, 20, 30 years when this generation is like running for government off, like political office, can
Yeah.
be like can bother people. It's like I don't know what the bar has to be.
I sometimes I think about what if my all of my teen years and early 20s were recorded.
It's
That would have
terrifying.
looked, yeah, yeah. I did all of the drugs, all of them,
Yeah.
all of the time. So that would have been, there would have been some very questionable posts that I would have tried to scrub from the internet. I am sure.
And part of me is like, you want to tell people like, younger kids, like, it might not seem like it now because life is great when you're in high school and college, but like at some point you're going to want a job somewhere or to do something and people are going to Google you and look and like, they're going to, all this stuff is stored in, Facebook and Google servers somewhere and is accessible and somebody's going to find it. But then I also think like, I think right now, like we're in this weird buffer period where you have the people who are hiring came from a different generation.
Yes.
But at
Yeah.
some point, 10, 20, 30 years from now, like, the people that are hiring are going to be this generation. And they're just going to be like, yeah, well, hey, I also did, weekly keg stands and TikToked it, for 4 years. So I get it. Like, this is not that, hired. Like, he's got a good GPA. We'll hire him. It
Yeah.
seems like there's going to be a changing of the guard. And when that happens, it's going to be a lot less relevant whether what you posted and what you said on social media.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. I mean,
So
I think college and GPAs are going to become incredibly irrelevant as well. It's not going to be a metric that people are really measuring by as much as education starts to shift around quite a lot.
well, actually, so I was going to go on to the economy stuff, but that's a topic that's also interesting to me.
Yeah.
What do you like?
I didn't go to college, so I made my first million when I was 23. So when I was going to go to college, I was going to go to UC Santa Cruz, and I had my first company, those rhythm sticks where you hold one in each hand and throw the center stick around.
Those
And
are
I actually
awesome.
used to do this on fire. I was a fire dancer when I was a kid. My biggest show was Thrown with Jane's Addiction. Everybody loves that. The younger people that are listening now are like, who even is that band? It's a big band. Check them
Really
out
good.
on
Yeah.
Spotify. But yeah, so I was already, I think when I was 18, I did like $75,000 that year. And so I was going to college and I would have done a double major in women's studies and Central and South American
So you
studies.
have been
Like,
unemployed for the rest of your life.
would you like fries with that? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. So that was not really been a moneymaker. So I just was like, I already know how to make money. I already know how to like start something that I can sell. I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur, even though I clearly was. Just the languaging was different back then.
Yeah.
But so college didn't end up becoming necessary for me. And then once I knew how to start a company, I started a t-shirt line then, and then the sticker company, and then myriad other companies. And now I teach at like Harvard and CU Boulder and stuff, teach entrepreneurship. But yeah, I never did get the degree yet. Maybe one
Yeah.
day.
Maybe the goal is to become so successful you get an honorary degree, so you don't have to actually go to college. Harvard just gives you a diploma one day because you're rich enough and you gave them a building.
I've already been discussing it with CU Boulder because I love Boulder.
But it is interesting. I think about this now. Larissa and I think about this a lot more with Quinn because we've been doing meeting with our people at Chase and like financial planning for him. And it's like you have these 529 plans where you can put money tax free away and then it can be used for education. But you're also thinking like that's 18 years from now. And I think back on what the world was like 18 years ago, and it's unrecognizable, right?
Yeah.
Like the amount of stuff like 18 years ago, like this didn't exist. Like literally almost
Right.
everything in my office right now, technology wise, didn't exist. Like it's hard to fathom how much the world's going to change in 18 years. And personally, I think COVID had an impact on this. It just sped up. I think COVID had
Yeah.
a weird impact on the adoption curves, both positively and negatively, right? You had things that were going to take longer to become mass adopted that shrunk dramatically, e-com, deliver, like, all like next day delivery, Amazon, all that stuff. But then you also had things that were definitely going to fizzle out at some point or have a reckoning, but would have taken
Yeah.
a lot longer, like I think college in traditional sense. And this just hit it, like just TKO'd it. It was like, you had a year of kids basically still paying 20, 30, 40, 50 grand,
Third
but
rate.
doing virtual school. And people are rethinking that. They're like, what am I getting out of this, right? I'm writing you a check. And for most people, that check is coming from a bank that lent you the money that's going to charge insane interest and you're never going to be able to pay off unless you become an entrepreneur and sell business, have a big exit. Then maybe you can have the ability to pay it off. But I've been asking all this, like, just what do you think? Like, I know you didn't go to school, but like, you understand it. Like,
Oh, yeah.
18, 20 years from now, do you think traditional college exists? Do you think it's like just the Ivy still exists and then like everything else is because that's so prestigious and rich kids are always going to go there? Or do you think it's like just the whole pricing changes, or does it go all online? Does Google come in? Like, there's so many scenarios that could play out.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is there are companies, fantastic companies like General Assembly, which I know that you're familiar with, but your listeners might not be, which is a company actually that a friend of mine started, and they go to companies, big big employers like Google, like Facebook, like these large tech companies, and then they get the entire criteria of the company that their starting engineers would need to have, and then they teach exactly that. And then if you do well in the courses, because there is a high attrition rate for people that maybe just aren't going to be able to keep up to snuff, right? So like 25% of them are not going to make it through. But if you do make it through, you have guaranteed interviews to get hired onto these companies. That's your job, obviously, from the interview point, but you're getting a very strong recommendation. So it's almost like that is sort of a college, but it also is sort of like a staffing firm. It's a bizarre mix
Hybrid,
of stuff. Yeah, and I think that there's going to be stuff like that in multiple different verticals. I think that, we're going to get back to some brass tacks and have like schools like that, but like for plumbing and for farming and
all the
for,
trains.
yeah, all the training schools, I think is going to be way bigger. I think there's going to be like a more of a segmentation of like, what do you actually want to do with your life? So like my niece and nephew are lucky enough to go to one of Bill Gates' schools up in Seattle, and they're on different tracks. And my nephew is on a video gaming track, and my niece is on a plumber's track. And she just was graduating, and in 2 years, she's going to be making over $100,000 as a plumber.
Yep.
And like a lot of kids don't even realize that's an option because manual like contracting jobs aren't really taught as an option. Yeah, and I'm just like, if you're like dad isn't in the welding union, you don't realize that a master welder is making like $140 an hour. So there's, or maybe even more than, actually it's more than that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, people aren't seeing that as an option. And I think there's going to be a far rounder view of what you can do as something that you love and will be excited about and will benefit society.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think there's the irony of where we've gotten as a society is that it's almost become backwards, like how traditional liberal arts schools were created, right? So it used to be that if you were wealthy, if you were a Vanderbilt or a Rockefeller, right, you had the freedom to study, which is what, if you look at the Latin of liberal arts, which I'm going to butcher it if I pronounce it, but the Latin word essentially means freedom to study. So you had no financial burden. You were wealthy. You didn't need a job, a skilled job. So you could go to school for 4 years and you could learn about Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and world history and all these really interesting things, literature, because you could just increase your knowledge base, right? And have fun learning. Now it's almost the opposite. It's people that really need a job, that don't have the financial freedom to study, are going to school, getting a massive debt, and they're getting degrees that are cool. Listen, like, if you want to major in, literature or, women's studies or, there's a lot of degrees, like, that's great. If you want to do that because you love it and you understand that coming out of school, I don't have a lot of job prospects, right? I can maybe teach, I could write a book, like there's some things I could do, but I'm not going to be rich. I'm going to live a normal life, but I love it. That's great. Like, more power to you. But we have a lot of people that are doing that, coming out of school and complaining because they're not getting great jobs. It's like, it's not fair. I can do this job. It's like, well, right now, there is one of the biggest, I think, like disconnects and voids in the job market that's ever existed, because we have so many job openings for high quality, high paying jobs, but there's nobody to fill them
Yeah.
because everyone's trying to, wants to go this route, right? Everyone wants to go the big title, the fancy job route. And there's so much competition, right? There's tons of lawyers, tons of doctors, tons of, every other kind of high degree you could think of. But there's not a lot of people coming out with, welding degree, like, welding skill sets and
Yeah.
carpentry and plumbing, these things that, like, listen, it's going to take a while for robots and AI to replace those jobs. Those are very nuanced jobs that require lots of dexterity in your fingers and stuff. They're very secure. They pay really well. You're constantly moving up the ladder. And there's, I think the stat I saw was something like 7 million, maybe I'm wrong, 3 to 7 million job openings in the country by, factories, manufacturing companies that just can't fill it. They can't find anybody to fill it because there's not enough, kids that are learning trades. So we definitely need to figure out a way to incentivize and destigmatize those careers. We can't have people thinking that, like, plumbing is an embarrassing job, which I think is what a lot of people do. They think, I don't want to be a plumber because it has this negative connotation. A plumber, like, my kid's a plumber, my kid's a welder. It's like, ooh, that's I'm sorry that they didn't go to college. It's like, don't apologize to me. They moved out. They're making $70,000 a year. They have a career path. They're on an apprenticeship. Like, what's bad about that? Oh, my kid got a BA in philosophy from some liberal arts
Right.
school, but he's living on a couch. It's like,
Yeah,
well,
what's
which one's
interesting,
more embarrassing?
I just know about the plumbing because my niece is in it. By 3 years in, her average income will be just under $150,000 a year. And then
Amazing.
she'll be scaling up from there. And she's planning to do it as her own business. And so it will even be more because she's going to do commercial contracts with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like insane. And there does need to be a reframing. One of my favorite, because I have been a member of the Global Economic Institute for 15 years, and I study lots of economics and systems, all types of systems thinking is like my jam. But one of my favorite sayings is everything falls of its own economic weight. And right now, these kids are being fed a complete fucking lie that they have to go to college. And so then when I do lecture at like Harvard or Stanford or something, and then I go and lecture to a state school and I'm in an MBA class and they're asking me equivalent questions that like my honors program classes in high school would have been asking. That's the educational level I'm dealing with. And I'm like, why the fuck are you paying $100,000 to go to business school? Because you are never, ever going to be able to compete with the kids who are going to a real business school. And you have almost the exact same price tag and you are being sold this lie that is what you need to do to succeed. When in reality, maybe that's not your best move, but they don't know it. And then the fact that we have allowed usurious loan rates that would be not allowed for adults who are purchasing homes to be bestowed onto our children. Like, we have usury laws in this country for a reason.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, you can pay the amount that you're told that you owe every single month on a loan and not pay down the principal at all. And that is ridiculous. There should be laws that you are at least paying 60% of the principal down on every single payment. It's insane that we as a society are allowing our children to be so burdened by this unnecessary debt.
Yeah, it's wild, and the problem is what really needs to happen is the government needs to stop backstopping, right? Because the only thing that is leading to colleges raising their prices every year is because they know that the students can get a loan to pay regardless of what the amount is, and the people issuing the loans know they can write the loans because they know that you could die and it doesn't matter. That debt's going to your parents. Like, there's no way. It's the only debt you can't get out of in any capacity, and it's backstopped. So there's almost zero risk for the lenders. They have all the upside and none of the downside, which is like, let's just keep raising it. Let's keep pushing the envelope. But what's wild is, like, if in any other scenario, right, you have a 17 or 18-year-old kid that has no life skills, no job skills, no career path, went into JP Morgan Chase, went into my branch of Chase, right? And sat down and sat down with Fernando, my banker, and said, hey, I'd like $200,000. I'd like a loan for $200,000. I have no income. I don't have a college degree. I don't really know what I want to do with my life yet, but
Mm.
I'm going to invest this money into X. 100% chance that nobody would, not a single person in the history of asking that question would get that loan. No bank in America or any country, any first world country, would underwrite that loan. Yet
Right.
it's done every day in the thousands across the country,
Mm.
and it's weird. It's like it's it's preposterous. Like when you think about any scenario where if you just changed one variable of it, like
Mhm.
who is taking the loan or who's asking for the loan, like, and everyone said that that's crazy, like shouldn't be a thing. And I have another example like that I can share about like just our debt. We can talk about when we get to the debt because I have a similar like metaphor there that kind of works. But yeah, it's wild like that the level of risk taking that is allowed in terms of writing loans to minors in some cases
It's
that like
crazy.
literally can't vote, can't enter the military, can't drink, but can take out $100,000 $200,000 loan. Like
Yeah.
it's makes zero sense, and we just keep doing it.
Also, let's add in there that the things that we don't teach in school anymore. Obviously, there's a humongous problem that we don't teach civics and ethics and humanities. That's hugely an issue in our society,
Financial
especially
management, investing, yeah.
what I was just going to say next. And so when they're taking out these loans, there is zero understanding of the way that interest works and that these compounding interests that they're being charged on the loans, which is why the principal is not being taken off, works. And then they're like, the lenders make it sound great, like, oh, just take a year or two off and defer the payments. It's
Yeah.
no big deal. You got this. We've got your back. And there's not really, because there isn't an understanding of budgeting or payoffs or loans or money or investing or any type of strategic money utilization at all whatsoever, then we're just screwing over our kids. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't even have kids, and I'm like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Yeah, that's I think that's also a it seems like it should be illegal. Like the laws we have in our country, sometimes it's like you shake your head. It's like we've had, we throw people away in jail for 10 years for having like some weed, right? But like we let grown adults pitch $250,000 loans to 17, 18-year olds without really explaining exactly what they're getting into and making it very clear to them. But like one is totally legal, one's totally illegal, right? It's like, to me, it's like, again, this may be extreme, but it's like Madoff when he was pitching his Ponzi scheme. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
unfair.
No,
It's
it's
you have
not
one guy that is able to pitch this to sophisticated people and get money from them. Like you have sophisticated financial people and you have people that have no idea about anything financial. And the education gap, there needs to be laws in place to protect people. And unfortunately there's not like it's even that way with payday loans and stuff. If you watch, there's been like American Greed episodes about these different payday companies where it just you have 50-year-olds that don't understand how compound interest works. That they call up and they're like, I've been making payments for 2 years, but my balance is the same. It's like, well, all that's been happening is you've been paying the interest off every month. So you've literally been paying us for nothing for 2 years, for 3 years.
Yeah, every time that I hear in any context within America that we have this big problem that we can't solve, that we don't have money to to give good healthcare to all of our citizens, or we don't have money to do whatever, that is just completely not true. There's just a massive misallocation of our funds and if there are very few things that we could correct that would correct us as a country so that we would stop losing power on a world scale. And it would be to correct the educational system, the healthcare system, stop the overpayment and the grift that we allow in big government, any type of government office that you can think of, whether it be the Department of Defense or the IRS or any department. The way it works, so fix the spending in the military, in healthcare, and in schools. Then you could have the best military, healthcare, and schools at a fraction of a cost, because the overspending and the grift is just insane. In the military, if you get a specific budget to do a specific project and you don't spend your whole entire budget, the next year you will get a reduced budget. for that project.
Yeah.
So you're encouraged to spend it no matter whether you need to or not. And then you have to buy from these particular suppliers, which is why you come up with the famous case of like the $1,200 screwdriver, because you can only buy it from one vendor. So then that vendor charge
whatever they want.
And so, and then also, I'm sorry, you would also have to fix these enormous lawsuit settlements, because people see like an accident happening as like somebody won the lottery, and it doesn't really matter what the lawsuit settlement is. When it's out of control, when it's like a $12 million settlement for something, insert the thing, a medical misallocation, something that happened with a city that gets sued, it doesn't really matter what it is. When you have these usurious things going on, all of that money comes from somewhere. And where it comes from is incredibly high insurance rates that then get passed on. The malpractice suits, it's like you win the lottery if you get hurt in a hospital. And because of that, we pay, because of many reasons, but we pay like $1,200 for an EpiPen that in Canada you can buy for $60. It's from the same manufacturer.
Yeah.
And it's our government has allowed that to happen. And we have elected officials in there who vote, in all parties, who vote not in the best interest of the actual individuals within the country. And so there will just continue to be a chasm where the people on the lower half of society just get screwed, and the people on the upper half of society just get wealthier.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, what ends up happening though, it's somebody's got to pay. So we continue to misallocate funds and continue to overspend. It gets passed on, right? So whether it's increased tax rates, increased taxation, or things like inflation, which is going to happen, which is a tax on everybody, right? People don't realize that, but inflation is a tax, and unfortunately, it hurts the lower income part of our society more, because typically inflation hits things like a lot of consumer spending. It's like your McDonald's, your fast food, your groceries, your diapers, and those are the things that disproportionate part of your budget are being spent by lower income Americans. Their dollars worth a lot less. There's so much economics that I want to talk about, but let's start here because this is kind of a bridge between the two.
Mm-hmm. What are your I think that the biggest problem that we're in America with currencies is that we have that America violently has defended the U.S. dollar and kept it at a stable almost since the 70s, a stable equivalent, like a dollar is worth a dollar, basically. So prices have gone up and inflation has happened, but it hasn't been a hyperinflation, or there hasn't been a hyper deflation of our economy. And whenever somebody threatens our dollar to make it drop, like what happened, for example, with the with Desert Storm in the Iraqi war, what happened was the Iraqis said, we are not buying oil in US dollars anymore. We're going to buy oil on the gold standard, which would be a far, far more normalized way to do it, because despite what all of Americans think, America is actually not the only country in the world. I know that's crazy to hear, but like when you go to Europe, gas is $7 to $9 a gallon. That's actually how much it costs, because you're buying your petrol in liters. But here, because we force all of these Arab nations to sell oil on the US dollar standard, it normalized, and they were like, you know what, F you, we're going to sell it. And it was gold, I think, but it might've been euros. And as soon as they did that, we bombed the shit out of them. And we do that whenever anybody threatens the US dollar. But things falling of their own economic weight, like that's just one tiny example of a million examples like that. There's only so long that can go on. There's only so long that you can borrow from Peter to pay Paul before somebody comes calling for the cash. And that's what's going to happen most likely in the next 2 years. And we'll experience hyperinflation in the next 2 years, where you are going to see a normalization of gas price, where people won't even remember that gas used to be, $2 or $2.50 a gallon, because it's going to spike up, and it's going to be really, really hard for a while. But I think that either it's going to normalize or come back down slightly, but it won't be these low reduced rates. But it does hurt the lower part of society, because most people cannot afford $7 for a gallon of gas, and they cannot afford $10 for a gallon of milk. And they don't understand the economic things that are getting moved around that cause the pricing to go the way that it does. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts. I also, what I was going to get to is like minimum wage. So let's table that. Yeah. Let's talk about the minimum wage after. I don't want to forget about it. But yeah, I mean, a country's currency is their single most, if you're the government and you're in control, that is the single most important tool you have, is controlling that currency, especially when it's a fiat, right? When it's not attached to gold anymore, because you can then use that to, as a tool, as a weapon to do anything, right? And it started with, the Yuan dynasty in China, with like 880, when the first kind of experiment of detaching currency from gold or from an asset, which is like to write these promissory notes. And then they were like, this is interesting. We can just write paper to people and print more paper. And they did it for a long time. And eventually it all fell apart. And then Genghis Khan came in and destroyed it, took over. But there aren't many examples. Obviously, Japan is an example of a country that's able to run like a 280%, deficit for a long time, and have, that gap in terms of how much currency they have and debt they have compared to GDP. But like, people point that out, right? People that are kind of proponents of modern monetary theory, which is, for anybody listening, like, we might get kind of nerdy here about economic talk, so you guys can Google this or you can fast forward through it, whatever you want to do. But like, people that are for, on the far left, that are for what we're doing right now, it's modern monetary theory is like the concept that they're basing this around, which is the idea that like, until you were essentially at full employment, at like 0% unemployment, it should be your role as a government to print more money and to basically flood the economy and the government, with more cash to get to that point where everyone's employed and you're at full capacity, your supply meets demand, and like everything is operating efficiently. I just think it's a theory for a reason, because I don't think anybody's really done it. And the only examples can be pointed out of countries that have been able to print and not experience hyperinflation, like Japan, aren't great examples either, because Japan's basically spent 20 years in a zero growth environment. Like, sure, like it's better than hyperinflation. It's better than, Venezuela or Germany after World War I, but like, is having the stock market not go up for 20 years like really that much better? Like, nobody builds wealth. There's no real economic activity. You're kind of just in this stagnant environment, right? Where you kind of, and so I don't think that there's a lot of data to support that this is a good idea. I think that the challenge right now, this has been the challenge forever and it will continue to be the challenge, is that our politicians operate in 2 to 6 year windows, right? Those are kind of the re-election windows. So every decision they make is based around them getting reelected. Okay. Yeah. And people hyperbolic discount. So they, that's why people have a hard time losing weight. They have a hard time controlling spending, because what I can have today versus the benefit in the future, it's hard to remedy those things. It's like, hey, I could be in incredible shape and have an 8-pack in a year from now. Or I can enjoy this ice cream sundae. It's right in front of me. It's it's an ice cream sundae. Or it's, hey, I can have, $10,000 invested and saved in the stock market in a year if I save X, Y, and Z over the next few months. Or I can have this PlayStation 5 today. People have a very hard time balancing those two things and having impulse control. And so it's the same thing with government policy. It's like climate change, or these big issues. It's so far down the road, the impact that's going to happen us. And the cost we have to pay today is today. And people might say they want this thing, but it's like, if I have to sacrifice today or not receive what I want to receive today for some future payoff, people have a hard time doing that. And so politicians know that. And so it's a lot easier to say, like, if you're, and I don't make this political because I'm I'm pretty down the middle. Like, if you're Biden right now, it is much sexier to say, like, let's start writing more checks. Let's start sending, let's not even do tax credits anymore. Let's just send money direct to people. That gets a lot of people excited. Like, there's a lot more people on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum than upper income, right? And so if you're bottom 50%, and all of a sudden the government now starts sending you checks direct in the mail every month, and you get more money from them, more assistance from them and stuff. That's now, I need that money. I like these people. They're giving me money now. They don't understand that money is not, no matter how much they tax the 1%, there's no amount of taxation that can pay for all this stuff. They can't even tax us enough to pay for current obligations like Social Security, right? To fund those, let alone all these new $1 trillion plans. So the only way that money gets to go to you is it gets made out of thin air. It's printed, and
right.
it's funny money, and that has repercussions, right? Over time, if I keep printing more and more and more money, that dollar is worth less because there's more of it, right?
Yes.
And so it might sound great today that, hey, the government sends me a check for $1,000 every month. That's great today. But if they keep doing that for years and years and years, that $1,000 is going to be worth $800, then $600, then $500. And then pretty soon it's going to be, if you were, I think it was Zimbabwe, you can go on to eBay right now or Amazon, and you can literally buy a $20 trillion bill from Zimbabwe for like $5. It's like a novelty thing. It literally costs people trillions and trillions of dollars to buy like a loaf of bread. By the time their inflation got to the point where it was just, this is worthless. Like, let's just burn paper money because it's worth nothing. And the same thing happened in Germany after World War I, because they thought, hey, the world governments, they're all taxing, they basically fined us for the war. It's like a penalty. We had to pay all this money back. Nobody wants to trade with us. We have no infrastructure. We can't really do anything. So let's just print money, and then we can pay all these people back with printed money. And it worked for like a year or two. Things started booming. People were speculating and investing, and then it led to a massive depression, which led to a massive social void. People were angry. People were upset. Civil unrest. And this might sound dramatic, but what happens in times of desperation and civil unrest, when people are poor and homeless, it leads a vacuum for somebody like a Hitler, a charismatic person to come in and inspire people and motivate people and do terrible, terrible, terrible things. And I'm not saying that's the same thing that's going to happen today, but there are risks of like a civil war. You have a lot of people that are very, very unhappy right now, that are very fractured and splintered politically.
There's a hyper radicalization that's super easy among people who are feel like they're in a corner. So it's very easy. That is the point where it's super easy to say it is these people's fault. Generally speaking, insert any group of brown people or different religion of people, it's their fault.
Yeah, Germany was the Jews. It was these are the they took all our money.
Different religious group. So it's always a different cultural or religious group, or it's the intellectuals' fault. They fucked up. Right. So there's always a they that you can blame. And the problem, one of the biggest problems with getting politicians to take action is any type of long-term economic. So any economic effect that you see in any 4-year presidency is the result of the previous presidency.
Yep.
So like when Trump got into office, he's like, I'm great with the economy. I'm like, Barack Obama spent 8 years cleaning up the wreck of the economy from the recession. And I'm not political either way, but that's what happened. And so then whatever economic policies that were in place that Trump put in place, those are going to be felt in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. So what a lot of politicians know that maybe the average citizen doesn't necessarily understand is whatever you're currently living in is the repercussions of 2 to 3 years back of the economic policies that have been put in. I mean, it's like a rolling thing. It's a long-term thing. It's longer than 2 or 3 years, but your immediate repercussions are what got put into policy 3 or 4 years ago. Just always, whether that was in the Reagan administration, Clinton, Bush, Obama, it doesn't matter whose administration, no economic policy changes are actually felt widespread in the economy for a long time because it all has to flow through. All the taxes have to come in and the things have to get
with
paid.
the exception of some like very, very dramatic things like during 2008 with like the quantitative easing and stuff. But policy stuff, almost all policy taxation stuff. Yeah, that's 2, 3, 4 plus years down the road. You're feeling that.
Yeah, and they're written that way. They're scaled in. So then what was particularly interesting, this most recently happened with Trump, but this can happen with any administration. I am not picking on him. But the tax laws that went through, they're like, this is going to help the middle class. Except for that, I read tax law. Like I read the whole laws of the stuff that are getting pushed through just because I'm a crazy person. And I'm like, this is totally giving me such a tax discount. All of these laws, the tax laws that got passed in the most recent reform. I think that was like in 2018. And then the middle class did get a tax break, a big one for the first year. they paid a little bit more the second year, and then it rises up every year after that. So all of these people are hearing, oh, this was so good for us, but they're seeing on the bottom line that it was so bad for us. And now they're going to be like, Biden screwed us over because he raised the taxes. And I'm like, that shit happened 3 years ago. And I'm not picking on him. That was just the administration that did it then. Every administration does stuff like this where their policy years down the line to go.
It's a game, right? And so it's all these people are playing is this game of, it's almost like hot potato at this point, where it's bound to explode at some point. It's just a matter of how bad the explosion is, right? And I think people need to realize, like, there's been a lot of doom and gloom talk lately, right? I think it's important to realize, like, the market operates in cycles, and some of those cycles are worse than others, but they're cyclical. And so if you look at, like, this is what I meant to share, that I just got too busy and was too lazy to go through the work of posting this the other day. But like, when everyone's freaking out about the crypto crash that happened, right? I'm sure a lot of people that don't understand investing and the best ways to invest and looking at, long term, and in fact, 95% of day traders lose money, looked at what happened and panic sold, right? And just try to get out. And then obviously the last 2 days, things are back up, different things I have up 60%, 80%, right? If you look at any crash, any recession over the last, 100 years, and if you took a chart, you went on E-Trade or whatever, pulled the chart up, and you looked at like mid 08 to 09 or whenever the time frame was when the market just tanked. If you showed somebody a chart of that, they'd be like, that's terrible. Like, people got hammered there. Like, I would have sold everything. But then if you zoom the chart out and look to today and said, if you didn't do anything, and when the market started crashing, and you just held everything you had, you would be up, just if you held the S&P, like, just not even like individual stocks, S&P, Dow, NASDAQ, right? You would be up hundreds of percent if all you had to do was just wait and be patient. And, unfortunately, I think that's the bad thing about most people is they're emotional. They don't understand how markets work. They don't understand that there's ups and downs. And so inevitably there's going to be a significant market correction. And let's say the market crashes 60%. Let's say that happens. Over the next 2 years, the market falls 60%. Okay, that's going to suck in those 2 years if you are retired. Like, the only people that really impacts is if you are retired or about to retire. That's when that timing really sucks. But if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, it's irrelevant. If anything, it's a buying opportunity. It's, hey, if you liked buying Apple today and you think Apple's a great company, in a year from now, if it's down 60%, you should really love buying Apple, and you should be dollar cost averaging and buying every month over that period of time, and realizing that, like, if I don't sell, it's not a gain, it's not a loss. Right? Like, at the end of the day, you could be up $1 million on crypto. Most people talking about like their crypto portfolios and stuff. It's like, if it's not in your bank account in US dollars, and you can't pay your rent, and you can't buy your groceries, and you can't pay for anything, it is not real, right? It's only real until you sell and exit a position. And it's the flip side too. It's the loss. If you're down 50%, you didn't lose 50% until you sell it, right? And I think, unfortunately, that goes back to the education thing. There's just not enough investment education, financial education. The fact that, hey, if you're 16 years old right now and you start putting $50 a month into an investment account, and you do that every month, and you increase just to keep up with inflation, you'll have $1 million when you retire. $50 a month. At 16.
It's completely insane. I trade a very lot, and I trade a very lot, especially in the crypto markets. And so I'm going to do your listeners a really big favor and explain something to them that they probably don't understand. So here are my main core rules of trading. Number one, only invest in things that have a true assets that have a true actual inherent value, right? That are actually being utilized. So in the crypto markets, there are chains. So think of it like an iPhone. Like, you have your iPhone and they have all the apps on your iPhone. A blockchain is the actual core informational line, and those have an inherent value because they're currently in use for something. So you have like Bitcoin SV, BSV, Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, Polkadot, Atom. There's just like a Tezos. There's a very few chains. There's like less than 10 chains that are actually in hard utilization right now. So if you're investing in those, and you get caught at the top with your money, doesn't matter, because it's going to go back up higher by September. It's going to be triple as much as it is at the highest that it was a week ago. But if you're investing in shit coins, don't do that. Like, don't invest in something because your friend's brother said like Safe Moon is the best coin ever. But if you understand the underlying asset that you're evaluating in, so that's the first rule. Only invest in things that have a true actual value. And in the crypto markets, that means that they're actually in utilization. The number 2 rule is you only lose money when you sell, which Maxwell just covered. Like, right, Max? You only lose money when you sell. So don't sell when you're upside down and you're freaking out and you're pulling your money, because it's totally going to come back up. And then the number 3 is tuck in and out of your trades. Take your profits when they're at the top. So there is an allocation that I have. It's a working, it's an incredibly complicated formula that runs, but it essentially breaks down to this. When the market is the highest that it's ever been, at that point, I have 50% of my money in cash and 50% of my money in crypto, because it's going to fall back down. So even if I get caught, the worst I'm going to get caught at is half of my portfolio, and that money goes into a pile that I called stuck trading. I literally, in my portfolio, call it stuck trading. And then I have like one it's called wait and snipe, assassin trading, which is when you buy at the bottom. And then I have a retrenchment fund that almost never gets spent. That's below that. So like, let's say Bitcoin does go to $20,000, which is a possibility. It would just touch there and bounce right back up. I have a retrenchment fund for that. And it's called true crash trading. And I have true crash short and true crash long. True crash short, I put 100% stop order in. As soon as I buy it, I put an order in to sell it at 100% profit. And true crash long, I put in a sell order. So like, let's say I get that Bitcoin order that I have in at 21,000 a Bitcoin, right? And I get a couple coins. Then I'm going to put an order in for 300% profit. This is how rich people get rich. Then I'm going to put an order in for 300% profit, but most of my trading is a 10% profit. I'm like, okay, Polygon Matic is going to go up 10% today. I just did this morning. I'm like, this is going to go up 10% in the next hour. And it did. And then I put an automatic sell order in 10%. If you do just 10% accruing return, compound return trading, and you start with $500, it takes you 84 trades to get to 1.4 million. You are welcome, your listeners. I know you know that, but I don't know if your listeners know. So
yeah,
you don't that often. You don't have to wait for the thing that's going to go up 100x. If you keep taking 10% profit, 10% profit, 10% profit, you are going to be rich in the next 10 years. But you can't sell when you're wrong on a bet. You have to just hang out.
Yeah. No, I think it's there's multiple schools of thought, right, in terms of how you approach trading, right? So there's people that are definitely more short term and more long term. And as a preface, we'll probably put this in the show notes as well. None of this stuff we're saying is financial advice. We're just talking
right,
talking shop. Just to preface that.
It's super not. You do you. You do you on your financial stuff. What the hell do I know?
But yeah, so it's having I think the thing is like having the tools and the knowledge and the experience and also the kind of emotional stability to do more stuff like that is also really important. Right? I think that the unfortunate thing, there's a lot of people that don't have the stomach or the knowledge or the expertise, and they're not doing it 24/7. So they're it's hard to beat people that are that have all those things, right? And that's why it's like, if you look at the stock market, it's like it's hard to beat high frequency trader, like all the people that are kind of competing against you. It's very hard to be in and out of things and do it fast enough, right? Again, the luxury of like the crypto market right now is there's a lot of inefficiencies, and those inefficiencies can be exploited over time. Those inefficiencies eventually shrink up, but that's like why high frequency trading exists in Wall Street, because the inefficiencies got so small that you have these shops that are spending tens of millions of dollars a year just to have their servers like a foot closer to the fiber in New Jersey, so they can get like a fraction of a second head start on trades. So that's who you're competing with, at least in the stock market.
Yeah. In the stock market, the biggest thing that I think people could really win on in the stock market, again, this is not financial advice, this is just a hole that I see in the market, is if you should study anything deeply that you're going to invest in. Like Beyond Meat, one of my favorite companies. I'm super long on Beyond Meat just in general as a company, because I'm a vegetarian and I love it. And it's a daily use product, and there's lots of reasons
why. To invest. That's how Buffett
Yeah.
invests. He likes
In 10,
things and he uses them.
exactly. In 10 years from now, I think it's going to be worth way, way more. But it went to the lowest that the stock had been in a year, right? So I bought some, but it's slower than crypto markets. So I ended up selling it at just a little tiny percentage win. But so if it's at $100 and let's say its normal resting place is at 140, if you're a person who invests and you're like, I'm in it for the long term, but you pull out whenever something is at it, you buy it at its lowest and it's, let's say it goes up 50%. If you even pull out half of your money and wait until it goes low again and then put that same amount in back low again, just do yourself a favor and study compounding returns, because you'll be astonished at how exponentially you can grow your money versus just keeping that same pile of money and letting that same money rise up and down and up and down. The way that I think about it is my dollars are soldiers and they go out for me into the world and they get their buddies and they bring their buddies home.
That's a good. I like that. That's good. Let's some of this. I know we're running up against it. There's still a lot of stuff we can do another episode to talk more about it. But because I mentioned this, I want to circle back to it. We can end here. What are your thoughts on minimum wage? And we talked a lot about the economy, and it's something I know it's a hot button issue right now. Obviously, $15 is what most people on the left, and Democrats are shooting for. People on the right think it shouldn't be $15. Some people think there shouldn't be a government mandated wage in general. There are multiple schools of thought. I want to get your opinion on that. I can share my thoughts on it, but curious where you're at.
I think that the minimum wage, I mean, I think it's more important to have a living wage, because I think that we're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't value the fact that an employee at a place can afford to actually shop at that place or afford to actually buy the products from that place. And I just personally think, I mean, I pay my employees incredibly well because they're the best resource that my company has. And it's so much more expensive to have to retrain people and get new people in rather than retaining a long-term employee anyways. But I think that in general, should the minimum wage be higher? Yes. The minimum wage is like poverty level wages. It's insane how low the minimum wage is. And it's just a core tenet of my own personal companies. Again, I obviously own a lot of companies that $15 is our minimum wage within my companies, but we're also in San Diego, so we pay people better than that because they require more money to actually live. So I think that what I would love to see our society moving towards is a living wage, to where people could actually have a living wage. And I can't legislate that because a lot of companies allegedly can't afford that. But for Walmart to pay every single one of their employees at $15 an hour, plus give them full medical and dental, all that benefits, you could add a penny per product of every product that's sold in the store, because it's only going to cost them a half a penny per product to actually implement those fees. So it's crazy to me that big US retailers like Walmart, whose employees are also one of the biggest subsidized income of employed people in the US, because they're making under poverty wages. So there's a lot of room for correction in it. And I think that it should be done in a way that's, I'm sure it's going to be legislated, but I honestly just think that these companies, it should be a voluntary thing. Like, why wouldn't you want your company to be paying a living wage to your people? You look at a company like Trader Joe's, which is one of the best companies in the US, and they pay phenomenally well, and they have the best people in the best environment and the best everything. So I think there needs to be a shifting of values of what we value for that to happen, though, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess there are a few points there. So one is like that what you just explained, and what I'm seeing happen as well is seems like the market adjusting for what people want to be paid anyway, right? It's like instead of forcing companies to pay X without any real nuance, that there's going to be, companies that want talent and want people to love what they work are going to compensate them well above that and start there. And companies that don't are going to try to cheap out, and they're going to get, high turnover and low quality employees and have issues. And then over time, it balances out. the big thing that I don't think enough people are talking about with it is the tranches of ages. Right. And I was listening, I think it was the Freakonomics podcast. They were talking about this. They had a bunch of people from different sides kind of talking about minimum wage and pro and con. And one of the researchers who they brought on, he basically ran a I think 6 or 5 year study in Seattle, which is the first real world study of gradually increasing the minimum wage to $15 over a multi-year period of time. And then they've come up with all the results. Basically what he found is that really there's a minimal net benefit to employees, that when all is said and done, because the way the employers reacted and stuff, like a small fraction of the employees are kind of in a net better place, the most skilled, the most experienced. But what ends up happening is that the employers essentially just start cutting hours, and they start getting more selective with who they hire. And this is the risk that I don't see anybody talking about is 1/5, or I think it's 1/5 of all employees, all like workers in America are, I think, under age of 21, and 2/5 under 25, right? And so if I'm an 18-year-old, like, hey, I don't have any experience yet. I don't have any real credentials. I don't have any real skills yet. Like, I this might sound bad to say, but like, I worked when I was that age, like, I worked a deli job for 14 hours a day down my beach town, and I made $7.50 an hour, $7, I forget what, $7.50 an hour. Like, that's what you do. I didn't complain. I'm 17, 18, right? And like, that's kind of what you do. And I got a lot of really great life lessons and experiences and skills, and I was able to go get a job that paid better and move up. The risk that happens, and this is kind of what the study showed, is that if employers are forced without any nuance in every state, even though cost of living are different, to pay $15 an hour to everybody, right? Regardless of whether they're a 18-year-old who's never had a job before, or a person that's 30 years of experience and has worked in fast casual restaurants for 20 years, right? Like, the employer is going to pick that person. If they have to pay $15, they're going to pay for the best person, pay $15, and they're not going to hire the 18-year-old who's, might miss work a bunch of times, might call it late, might call it sick, right? It's a lot bigger of a risk. And then you have a generation of kids that can't get their first job. And if you can't get your first job, how do you get your second job? How do you start moving up the ladder? And unfortunately, it disproportionately impacts, young men of color. Like that's what they found is young black men. That was the group that was hit hardest by this, because they're starting work earlier, and this is the career that they're working to get started in a lot of their first jobs. And so the unfortunate thing is, like, the side effect that the data shows is that this can actually hurt minority communities and communities that they're trying to help, because it creates a higher barrier to get that first job. So I would be open to it if there was more nuance put into it of saying, okay, it's 15 an hour, but you only qualify for that if you're over the age of 25. If you're under 25 and this is your first job, let's say, then it's this wage, right? Like, it's hard to force companies to pay everyone the same regardless of experience, age, credentials. Like, that's at least my opinion. Again, I know it's a complex argument and there's lots of viewpoints, but it's the early data that I've seen don't paint like a great picture of rolling that out like at a national level, at least as it is right now.
Yeah, I think that the use cases that I'm most looking for, that in which I think that there could just be social pressure on the CEOs. I think that if enough people, like I'm obviously, and I know that you are too, in the top tier business groups and like Summit and YPO and these business groups, so that when you're interacting with the CEOs of like a Walmart, let's take Walmart as a great example, they have plenty of money to be able to pay their employees. And yet their employees are one of the largest collectors of like Medicaid and Medicare, because they are so poorly paid that they still qualify for these medical benefits, because Walmart refuses to give them healthcare benefits. But Walmart can totally afford to do that just by raising the prices a penny. It's not even going to cost their stockholders money. And if they raise their prices by a penny, their profits would go up by a half of a penny, and nobody would notice 1 penny on every single item. And so it's literally just a mindset of not being in the mindset that you want your employees to thrive. And so being in a country which is very differently operated than other countries, where the CEO makes, like 10,000 times as much as the lowest person on the line, that's just not necessary. And so it is different when you have, the deli worker. I worked at a little yogurt shop. My first job was 7 toilets at McDonald's for $2.85, okay, an hour. Because that's what minimum wage was when I was a kid, because I'm a little bit older. And I did look for a job every single day, and 3 weeks later I had a different job, because I was like, why the fuck would anybody do this for $2.85 an hour? This is insane. But I do get what you're saying, and I could definitely see where like a lot of lower level employers, like small businesses, would just hire less people, or would not want people to be on full time, or would keep it under the certain number of employees you have to have in order to qualify for the minimum wage. It is a more nuanced argument than everybody just has to do X. But what I would love for people to keep in mind when they're voting against minimum wage is not even a living wage in most areas, even at $15 an hour. You can't actually go live and support a household and have children and support them, especially if you're a single parent household, on minimum wage. You just can't do it without assistance. And then it's like, oh, those people are just lazy. And you're like, no, maybe they're 40 years old and they can't get a better job than McDonald's. That's like where they're maxing out at their capacity. So McDonald's should probably be taking better care of their employees.
Yeah, there's definitely like, let's plan to pick this, because there's so many additional things to talk about here.
Talk about my companies. Go buy all my shit.
Well, I can give that. I always like to end with the plug zone. So let's plan to do that here. Then that's a good transition, and then we can pick up part two. So I know you have tons of stuff going on. You have an amazing T-shirt program for people that want to start their own print on demand T-shirt business. With Dan, you have sticker companies, T-shirt. You have all kinds of businesses, brands, opportunities, people to get involved. So for people that are listening and want to learn more about those things, like what are those things? Where can they go to learn more? We'll obviously drop links and all that good stuff, but this is the plug zone.
Yay. So I have a company called Teacher, and I know my other business partners in this company are going to be on your podcast as well. So it's with myself, and in the T-shirt space, I owned the exclusive sales rights on the merchandise for Minecraft, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, Walking Dead, The Hobbit, like all of the big gaming and geek T-shirts and merchandise to chain stores for years and years. So I've sold hundreds of millions of T-shirts. And then my business partner, Dan Caldwell, started Tap Out Clothing. My other business partner, Griff, started Combat Flip-Flops. You might have seen him on Shark Tank. He's a really successful flip-flop company. And Daniel DeMassa from Die Epic. So the four of us got together with our massive amount of T-shirt knowledge and wrote a book called How to Build a T-shirt Empire, and also started a course called the Mogul Course, which teaches you how to start a T-shirt company from scratch. And you can get it at tshirtjunkie.com. If you go to tshirtjunkie.com, that's where the course is.
Perfect. And I know I'm excited to talk with all of them. We're going to have a great conversation, and we'll make sure to share more info about the program in the show notes. And I know we have a special deal for everybody that we can pass that along, which is very exciting.
Use the coupon code UNICORN, and you'll get a good deal, and it'll all be in the show notes.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. We ran over. I appreciate you hanging out, having a great chat, open the doors on a lot of different topics. So we'll have to schedule a part 2, and we can dive into these in more detail. I'm excited about that. I love it. Awesome, Andrea. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Best of luck on all the amazing things that you're doing, and we'll circle back and have episode 2 soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Maxwell.
Thanks, guys. Talk soon.